Welcome back to America's Fractured Politics. You know, it's one thing to watch a political party shoot itself in the foot. It's another thing entirely to watch it burn down its own house while its voters are still inside. And that's exactly what the Republican Party is doing right now, with a level of cruelty, arrogance, and strategic blindness that borders on suicidal. We're not talking about a policy disagreement here. We're talking about Republicans torching their own political base in what can only be described as a kamikaze act of ideological warfare. Their refusal to renew the Affordable Care Act's critical subsidies is about to ignite an economic inferno across red America. And when the flames settle, millions of working families will be left scorched, facing insurance bills that they simply, mathematically, cannot pay. This isn't some abstract policy fight in Washington. This is kitchen table annihilation, engineered in broad daylight by politicians who have spent years branding themselves as champions of family values and fiscal responsibility. They've spent a decade screaming about protecting families, about defending freedom, about stopping government overreach. And yet, when given the chance to protect the very tools that keep their constituents alive, affordable health care, life-saving subsidies, a functioning insurance marketplace, they've chosen destruction. Let's talk about what this actually means, because this story isn't about some obscure Washington gridlock. It's not about partisan theater. It's about what happens when ideology collides with reality, and real people pay the price. In 2026, the ACA's enhanced subsidies, essentially the lifeline that's kept health insurance affordable for millions, are set to expire. Democrats have been pushing for renewal. Republicans have dug in their heels. And the result? Premium costs for families, especially in Republican-controlled states, are about to skyrocket. Picture it. Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, Arkansas. These aren't just names on a map. They're the epicenters of a healthcare crisis about to go supernova. In Texas alone, nearly 2 million people relied directly on Affordable Care Act coverage. 2 million. Many of them are small business owners, gig workers, farmers, people who make too much to qualify for Medicaid, but not enough to pay for private insurance out of pocket. And next year, their premium for a modest family plan can balloon by over $8,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a mortgage payment, a year's worth of groceries, an entire family's emergency fund, gone in one fell swoop. In Florida, the outlook is just as devastating. Elderly couples, near retirement households, small-town workers, they're staring at insurance costs that could double. $45,000 a year for coverage that was affordable just months ago. $45,000. That's more than some families in the Panhandle or Central Florida even make in a year. It's the same story across the South: Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee. In each of these states, hundreds of thousands will see annual jumps of $4,000 or more. $4,000 for the same plan, same coverage, same doctor. Except now they're paying for the privilege of policy sabotage. And here's the thing. This isn't just happening in swing states or the Deep South. The sabotage map stretches across the entire red state landscape. South Carolina, West Virginia, Idaho, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Indiana, Missouri, Nebraska, Montana, Louisiana, South Dakota. Every one of these states has tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people, depending on ACA structures. People getting cancer screenings, diabetes meds, checkups, emergency care. People whose survival depends on these subsidies not disappearing. Take a 60-year-old in rural Georgia or Missouri. If these subsidies vanish, their premium could shoot up overnight by $8,000 or more. Imagine being that person. You've done everything right, worked your whole life, paid your taxes, followed the rules. And now, because your state's political leaders want to make a point about big government, you're forced into a choice between insurance and bankruptcy. That's not conservative governance. That's cruelty with a calculator. When you cut through all the talking points, the numbers tell a story of pure economic brutality. 17 million Americans, 17 million people living in red states will lose staggering sums they simply don't have. There's nearly 3 times as many as in blue states. The pain will be concentrated not in liberal cities, but in rural counties and small towns, the very heart of Republican territory. Who suffers most? The people Republicans claim to represent. Middle-class, self-employed families who don't get coverage through an employer. Folks who make just enough to be ineligible for Medicaid, but not enough to afford insuring unsubsidized premiums. In short, the working backbone of Red America. They're about to wake up one day, open their mail, and find a letter that says their insurance now costs $24,000 a year instead of $7,000. Some will drop their coverage altogether. Experts project that at least 1.5 million will lose their insurance outright. The rest, they'll ration care. They'll skip doctor visits. They'll stretch medications until they no longer work. They'll decide that the next illness, the next accident, might just be the one they can't afford. This is not a policy disagreement. This is a deliberate decision to make life harder, sicker, and more precarious for millions of people. Let's pause on that moral dimension for a second, because it's not enough to talk about dollars and cents. The moral rot here is breathtaking. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They're teachers, truck drivers, single mothers, cancer survivors, small business owners. These are the people Republicans parade before cameras every 4th of July, every county fair, every Main Street USA photo op. Voters whose loyalty has been cultivated with church visits, flags, and slogans about freedom. But when those same voters need affordable health care, when a mom in Alabama needs insulin, or a retired couple in Missouri needs cancer screenings, they get abandonment in the name of ideology. Small government becomes a euphemism for big suffering. This is the hypocrisy at the heart of modern Republican politics, a movement that long ago stopped governing for outcomes and started governing for spectacle. It's not about solving problems anymore. It's about punishing perceived enemies. And if those enemies happen to be their own base, collateral damage. Republican lawmakers have spent years sabotaging the Affordable Care Act, chipping away at its mandates, undermining outreach, blocking Medicaid expansion, and branding it a failure that never was. Yet despite every effort, Americans kept signing up. The ACA became more popular than ever, especially in rural counties that Trump carried by wide margins. That's the irony here. The same voters the GOP depends on are the very people who rely most on the ACA. They're the ones who stand to lose the most. And when the hammer drops, they'll know exactly who to blame. Because you can't hide behind excuses when people see their premiums doubling in real time. You can't point to Democrats when your own party voted down sensible reforms purely out of spite. There's no both sides spin that will explain away a $10,000 increase in someone's health insurance. Every premium hike notice, every canceled policy, every GoFundMe for medical bills. These are receipts, hard, tangible proof of negligence, and the political fallout, it's going to be volcanic. You can almost feel the coming backlash building like pressure underground. Quiet, invisible, but unstoppable. Every voter who thought Obamacare was just an abstract liberal policy will suddenly realize it was their safety net. Every self-employed worker, every aging couple, every small-town nurse, they'll feel the betrayal in their bank accounts, in their empty pill bottles, in their canceled doctor appointments. Republicans have played an old game for years. Obstruct, blame Democrats, promise a better plan that never materializes. But you can't run on vapor forever. When the curtain drops and millions lose coverage, the public won't be asking for ideological justifications. They'll be demanding accountability. Make no mistake, there is no plausible deniability here. Republicans have not proposed a single coherent alternative. No replacement plan. No compromise, no budget offset, just a brick wall of bad faith and delay. Their strategy has become something darker than neglect. It's governing as performance art. They've turned cruelty into a campaign tactic, betting that if they hurt the right people in the right way, they can spin it as tough choices. But you can't spin an $8,000 premium hike. You can't gaslight families watching their bank accounts bleed. Undoing sorely needed programs just to spite a political opponent is not governance. It's sabotage. And it's sabotage with consequences measured in human misery. We should also be clear about the scale of this betrayal. For all of the GOP's talk about fiscal discipline, their obstruction will wreak havoc on state economies. When premiums spike, People drop coverage. When people drop coverage, hospitals, especially rural ones, bleed money. When hospitals close, communities collapse. We've seen this movie before. Look at Kansas, where refusal to expand Medicaid has shuttered multiple rural hospitals. Look at Mississippi, where ERS run on fumes because uninsured patients can't pay the same. The story is about to unfold nationwide, accelerated by the collapse of ACA subsidies. Every dollar ripped from those programs is a dollar ripped out of local economies. From doctors' offices, pharmacies, ambulance services, and small-town hospitals that are already hanging by a thread. Republican governors and legislators can't say they weren't warned. Economists, hospital associations, even conservative-leaning think tanks have been sounding the alarm for months. The data is unambiguous. This will hurt the very states that vote red most reliably. That's what makes this so staggering. This isn't just callous, it's politically suicidal. You can understand cynicism. You can understand partisan calculation. But willingly detonating your own base for the sake of ideological purity? That's not strategy. That's madness. Because the truth is simple. People don't forget when their kids lose health coverage. They don't forget when they're forced to sell a car or refinance a home just to pay a hospital bill. They don't forget the night they had to decide between paying rent or covering chemotherapy. Those stories linger. They become political firepower, and no amount of culture war rhetoric can drown them out. Over time, this moment will define the Republican legacy on health care, not just as the party that failed to fix it, but as the party that actively made it worse. They've taken universal health coverage, an achievable and overwhelmingly popular goal, and turned it back into a luxury product for the rich and well-off. It's a betrayal not only of their voters, but of their own professed values: family, faith, community, responsibility. Because what's responsible about pricing families out of insurance? What's moral about forcing grandparents to gamble their savings on medical emergencies? What's conservative about destroying the healthcare system that sustained small-town America? You can almost imagine the campaign ads of 2026 writing themselves. A mother in Florida looking at her bill, a veteran in Texas holding a cancellation letter, a child's empty medicine bottle, and 3 words flashing across the screen. Who did this? People will know. Republicans look to claim that government doesn't work, but too often they're the ones proving it. Because if you sabotage a working system until it fails, you can then point at the wreckage and say, see, we were right. It's a scam that's worked for them for decades, until now. This time the wreckage is too personal, too direct, too costly to ignore. This time the pain is red, rural, and Republican. As enrollment season opens, millions of Americans will log on expecting affordable options, and instead find horror. Some will blame the system, but more and more will trace the trail back to Capitol Hill, where their elected officials chose ideology over their constituents' survival. That's the thing about political cruelty. It always comes home. You can only starve your own communities for so long before they notice who's holding the knife. And when they do, all the slogans in the world won't save you. History will record this not just as a failure of policy, but as a failure of empathy, of basic political sanity. The Republican Party has made a decision so transparently self-destructive that even its own strategists are whispering about the backlash to come. They know what's coming. Town halls filled with furious voters. Hospitals on the brink. Families losing homes. The anger will be raw, righteous, and unforgettable. This is what happens when cruelty becomes a governing philosophy. When short-term politics outweigh human life. When winning the argument matters more than keeping people alive. In the end, the GOP's war on the Affordable Care Act will be remembered, not just for its callousness, but for its colossal stupidity. Because when millions of furious constituents head to the polls with canceled insurance policies and depleted savings accounts, there will be no question who lit the match or who watched the fire spread. This is America's Fractured Politics. I'm your host, Mark Mansour. And to every family facing the consequences of this orchestrated disaster, just remember, when you open that bill, when you see that new premium, when you wonder how we got here, it wasn't an accident. It was a choice. And the people who made it will have to answer for it. Thank you.